Whenever we start to consider the picture-in-picture technique and we wish to include animation, we do open up enormous possibilities. I could make dozens of videos using many different techniques. All of those techniques would have some similarities in the way they were created though. In this video, the animation of the inset images is going to be done for the same reasons as before, to allow us to present portrait format images in a landscape slideshow. For the demonstration here, I've got a number of landscape images. They are all going to be 16:9 aspect ratio. One or two of them, I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use just yet, but this one, for example, is 2560 by 1440, which is 16:9. But the one currently on screen, the skyscape, if I can find it, this one here, is 1920-1080. But all of the vertical images are portrait format in 3:2 aspect ratio, and that is a typical format we get from many of our digital SLRs. Now, what I thought I may do here is actually work in reverse. In other words, what I've done is to quickly put together a piece of animation so we can present our three portrait images, in this case 3 hot air balloons. I'm going to demonstrate what I have first, then we're going to tear it apart and create it. So I'm going to use the mini player here to show you this, and you can see the style of the animation that I wish to create. And remember, if you were to see this on your own PC using an executable file, it would be as smooth as silk. And then of course we could have another one using the same technique following on. Now, using the magic of video, I've been able to stop the video, create a second version of what we just saw, and start the video again. So let's just take a quick look so we can get a feel for how two of these same sort of animation effects look when they're strung one after the other. This one drifts off at the top, but before it leaves the screen, the next three are beginning to appear. And of course, it wouldn't be too difficult within the animation controls to make a series of variations on these, where if we're having maybe the 3 images leaving from the top of the screen, perhaps the next 3 could slide in from the bottom, and so on. So having torn all of that apart, let's build it. We need to go to the Objects and Animation screen. What I'm going to do here is to bring in those 3 images, but I'm going to put the 3 images I'm going to use inset on the sky here, inside a frame, so the frame can control the way all 3 images leave the screen. So I'm going to click into the grey area and I'm going to pick up a frame. There we can see it down here. I'm going to right click the frame and I'm going to add an image, and then I'm going to go to the images I want. I'm going to select all 3 and click to open them. If you look over to the right hand side, what we've just done here is made the frame a parent, and these 3 images are children of the parent. And what we're going to do a little bit later on is to allow the frame to remove all 3 of these together from the screen. But to make a start, let's select all 3 of them and all 3 of the keyframes, because the first thing I want to do is to make the images slightly smaller. Now, when we was doing this with the static images, I think we needed them around about 80% so we could get a nice spread of all 3. So we'll try 80% to begin with. The next thing I want to do is to spread the images out, so I need to select just one of them. I'm not sure where they need to be yet, so I'm going to select BD003 and just pan that to the left. I'm going to select number 2 and pan that to the right. Well, that was a bit of luck, because I think this one suits being in the middle probably more than one of the others, but this one sort of has a lean that way, so we could argue that number 2 may actually look better if it was over that side, which means number 3 would look better if it was over that side. So with the center one, 0, 0, so we know it's fully in the center, I can click on one of these and just get the gaps here more or less right. To be honest, I think I got that right a little bit by accident with 65, which means this one needs to be minus 65, and by some fluke I seem to have them spread nicely on my background. Now it may be a good idea to change the names of these, and I suppose we need to make a decision here. If BD003 is going to be the image on the right, when it slides in from the left, do we want the other images on top of this or below it? If we want the other images below it, then we need this one at the top. So I can go to the properties and I can say to this one is the one I want on the right, this one is the one I want in the middle, which leaves us this one on the left. So what may be a good idea here is if I move the middle one using the control key and the page up, so that we've got them all in order, left, middle and right. In actual fact, as we move these, the right hand one will cover the middle one will cover the left. So they're going to look much as we saw a few moments ago. Now let's add a little bit of style to these three inset images. We've got quite a neutral background with the sky, so I can hold the control key and select all three of them, and from the properties tab tick the border. I was going to select about 5, but 6 will do in white, and I'm going to put a shadow on them as well. We can customize the shadow of course, but for speed I'll allow you to play with that to your heart's content. We'll just sit with the default. Now I've mentioned a number of times when we embellish images like this, not a bad thing to do to have a look at them full screen. Now I can't record that and show you the fades on and off the screen very well because I don't capture enough frames while making this video, but what I can do, if we come out of the objects and animation screen, I can push up the slide duration to something like 16. We may not need all of that because I'm going to use, I think, about 5 seconds for the images to slide on, maybe 4 seconds to view them, and then perhaps 5 seconds to slide off. So we're going to be around 14 to 16 seconds. But this will allow me to go here and just bring it up full screen, and we can take a look and just evaluate if we're happy with the drop shadow and also the outline, and it looks okay. Coming back into the objects and animation screen, I'm going to need another keyframe for each of those 3 parts. So I'm going to put my cursor in the right hand part and use the Alt insert to create a keyframe, and then the next one and also the next one. I can select all 3 and I can line them up in the animation tab with the keyframe time of 5 seconds. So that's the time we're going to use to get the images from off screen sliding all on in 5 seconds. We're going to need to think about some speed here as well. So to give that effect where the 3 images are sliding in from the left, I decided to let's pick up the left hand image first, the starting keyframe, because at this keyframe that's where we want the image. So pick up the first keyframe and we're going to pan this off the screen. Now what we choose is not set in stone. Let's just use a value of -140, something easy to remember should we need to, but I doubt we do, because if I then select the middle one, what I need to do with the middle one is to put that right over the top. I'm going to use the cursor in the box option there, and I can use the down arrow, and I can slide this one and drop it right over the top, and you can see same value, -40. Now we need the right hand one, and we need to do the same thing. I'll click and drag this time, and once again you can see -40, 140 sets them all in exactly the same position. So as they slide on, of course the one on the top has to travel further, so it's working faster, and we start to see the effect we're creating. But now we need to consider speed. So let's go back to the top keyframe for the right hand image. We're starting the animation with the images off screen, so it's quite okay for the animation to start with a bit of a jolt. So I'm going to be selecting slow down because that's the obvious choice here for all of these. And all we're doing is we are just panning them. So I just need to go to the pan controls, but the important part of course is identifying the right keyframe. Add a modifier and we're going to slow down. But I need all three of these done in exactly the same way. And we're beginning to achieve what we want. Let's just press play, and there we can see the basis of the animation we've created, and it looks quite nice when it comes to that gentle stop. So where does the frame fit into our animation? Well, the frame is like an invisible hand, if you like, or a container that's holding the right, middle and left parts of the animation. So what we can do now is maybe if I select all parts including the frame, we can start to think about what we want the frame to do in relation to removing the images from the screen. Now if we're using 5 seconds for the images to appear on screen, and I suggested we'd want around about 4 seconds to view them, maybe even 5, let's say 5 on this occasion, then what I need to do with this keyframe is I need to put that at the 10-second position. Now I can do it with click and drag, or I can do it, as you know, by typing the value in the keyframe time. So what I've just done there hasn't altered anything that we've created. In fact, it's a holding point until then. Now we've got to decide what's going to happen between this point and wherever the next keyframe is. Alt insert will create that, and we'll put that over here. So now we can decide how we want these three images to leave the screen. Previously I had them moving off the top of the image, but let's go to the right this time. Now I think what I did here was to give a little bit of 3D rotation. I dropped the zoom down quite a bit, I think, and I panned them, in the earlier case, up off the top, but here we're moving off to the right. But we've also got to consider speed again, because we've got quite a lot going on here. We've got pan, zoom and rotate as this leaves the screen. And of course we could add other changes too. That's what I was saying right at the start, where there's almost an infinity of variations we can create here. But let's apply the speed here. The speed in this instance we can have accelerating, because we're not going to see it come to an end, because it's actually still working into the fade of the next image. So I panned it, so I need to accelerate that. I zoomed it, so I'll accelerate that, and I also rotated it, so I'll accelerate that. Now let's take a look by coming out of the Objects and Animation screen. I'll select the image just before it. We'll put one after it just to give something for it to fade onto, and we'll press play. Just taking a look in the mini player. Nice gentle stop. Now we can think about how long they're on screen before they move. Seems about right to me. Nice gentle start, accelerating off, and of course if we had any more of them then they could appear next. Now it hasn't been a massively long job or a difficult job to create that animation, but once we've created it we may as well make a slide style of it, so we can reapply it to another image or even use it to create derivatives. Now we need a little bit of thought here, I think, because if we're going to have slide styles created with backgrounds, we need to know what position that background needs to hold when we select it in the slide list here. If we select the images in the wrong order, the slide style isn't going to work. I'll demonstrate that in a few moments. Let's go back to the Objects and Animation screen. So I'm going to say that my background is always my main image. Where do we find this? In the Properties tab. There it is. It's already marked as number 1. So these, I'm going to select them as 2, 3 and 4. Now I can create my slide style. Clicking the button, I've got quite a number here, but I'm going to add this one in there. So Tools, Create a Style. I've got a category which I call Triptychs Multi-Images, but what I'm going to call this is, let's call it Demo 1, so it sort of indicates that's the first one we created. So if I wanted to recreate this here, what I can do is to select 3 other vertical images. Now let's go up to the top and select 3 different ones. Let's pick up the 3 glasses. If I drag them down in front of the background, things are going to go wrong. Let me go to my slide style. There's the demo we've just made. It's telling us there we need 4 images. But we need to know which image is the background. Well, if you always standardize and make the background number 1, then it's always going to come up right. If I applied this now, if I selected all 4 images and applied our slide style, it's not going to work correctly. Let me show you that in the Objects and Animation screen, because it's all going badly wrong, as you can see, just because we've got the images in the wrong order. So all we need to do is to, let's get rid of that, and I'll drag another one down. Let's drag that one down, and I'll pick up the 3 glasses, because the number 1 main image, the background, needs to be first. So when we put it there and select all 4 and go to our slide style, everything works fine. In fact, what I'll do is I'll drag this one down here, put the cursor there, and we'll test it, because now we can see the slide style and the animation we've just created in 2 sets of images. And with this one sliding off to the right and the next one coming in from the left, hopefully it'll have quite a nice balance. Let's stop it at that point. Now the slide style that contains the animation we've just created, I'm going to include with the download. All you need to do is to copy that to your desktop or somewhere safe on your computer, then go to your slide styles, tools, and choose to import the style. The style will come into a category of my naming, but you can always change the style category once you've got it installed. But don't forget, when you're going to do this, always make sure that whatever picture you've chosen for the background, because we're working with picture-in-picture for portrait format images here, whatever picture you've chosen first, you select first, and the vertical images follow. So when I select the 4 images, the slide style, which reminds us we need 4 images, when I select it, then the animation we've created is automatically applied correctly to any 4 images we select. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've cleared most of the images out of the slide list apart from a couple of blanks. What I'm going to do is to go and pick up my background and the 3 balloon images and drag them down between those 2 blanks. Now you can see what's happened here. This is now in the wrong place because we made this the main image 1. So before we apply our slide style, we need to drag that to the start and then select all 4 of the images. And when I go to my slide style here, we can see the demo that we just made. So if I click it, we see it coming on screen, and if we sit here long enough, we'll get a nice representation of this one floating off to the right. There it goes. There's the one that I demonstrated at the start, which is much the same. And of course we can always experiment with where these images start from, and this one will drift off above. But of course we're not restricted to having the images all the same size or even all the same shape. Now just before I leave this screen, I'm going to apply this and we'll just take a quick look at it. But you'll see the next one here is Triptych 3D, Triptych Static, Triptych Style 1. Most of them require 3 images, but there's one requires 5 and one 4. I'll just let you have a look at those in a moment, but for the moment I'm just going to apply that, because if I take you into the Objects and Animation screen, what we've got here is exactly the same as what we did before. The only real difference is the positions that the images stop in when they come to a stop, because if I just change the size of them without moving the position, then they look a little bit too widely spaced. But that's just a case of selecting the right keyframe and making the change. And if I was to select my frame here, I can actually see that what I've got is a few keyframes here that I didn't really need. I was working on another idea, and this is what happens when you start to get creative and try things. You often leave a keyframe behind that you don't need. So I've just highlighted all of those and deleted them, because when I put my cursor back at the start, everything still plays perfectly okay, because it's the keyframes of the images that bring them on. It's the keyframes of the frame that takes them off. If I wanted all of these images to leave the screen in different directions, then the frame would be superfluous. We wouldn't need it at all. But what we would need on each one of these images is another keyframe in this position, like the one I just removed, and then another one here which would allow me to take that image individually off the screen in any direction I wanted. So between this keyframe and this keyframe, the images would sit there, but between, I shouldn't have moved that, let's leave that there, but between that point and this point, then maybe I could have this image going off to the left, this one going off to the right, and this one going off down or up. Coming back to the slide list, I've removed the previous project. I'm going to go back to the slide styles, because you can see that when we don't actually select any images, we do still get an idea of what the animation we've created is going to do, even if it's with just those grey shapes. But you can see I've got the next 3 options after this one all demand 3 images. Well, because this is a triptych section, these ones don't require backgrounds, just 3 3-2 images selected from the slide list. Now, some users of Pictures2Xe have asked the manufacturers to create a way where they can leave a note somewhere on here, so that if they create a complex slide style, they can give the user, because we can export these, they can give the user a few instructions on which pictures to select first. What I'm going to do here is close and just select 3 vertical images and drag them down between my 2 blanks. They're selected, so we can go back to the slide styles and I can take a look at the one option. Here we're only asked to produce 3 images, but we still get a background because the background is formed from one of the images. Let me close that. Take note of where that balloon is there, because of course if I switch them around we get something very slightly different. There's the red balloon in the center. but we do get the opportunity to see exactly what the style and the animation does create. And the next one is just the static one, which is what we created in the picture-in-picture static videos. There's another one here, triptych style 1, which says it needs 3 images, and you can see exactly what we've created. And number 4 says 3 images, so let's take a quick look at that. You can see what I mean about this opens up enormous possibilities. And finally, number 5, I can't even remember what this one does. I think maybe the center one disappears. They all shuffle together. Then I think that one turns and disappears. So you can even use that turn to remove the images from the screen. But let's take a look at triptych style 2 that needs 5 images. Let me pick up 2 of these glasses and I'll drop them at the front end there, but then make sure I've got all of those selected. Back to my slide style, there's the 5 images, let's select it, and I think we'll take a look at this to finish in the mini player. This one incorporates a little bit of 3D as well. In normal circumstances, of course, we're probably going to have the same content in each of the images, but you can see exactly what the animation does.